All righty. Okay. Thank you all. We're going to call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock. This is the zoning hearing for Palm Beach County Board of Commissioners, December 12th, 2024. Would you all in the back of the room quiet down, please? Thank you very much. May we have a roll call?
Vice Mayor Baxter.
Here.
Commissioner Flores.
Here.
Commissioner Powell.
Here.
Mayor Marino.
Here.
Commissioner Sachs. Commissioner Weiss.
Here.
Commissioner Woodward.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've asked Commissioner Woodward to do the invocation and the pledge.
May we approach today's business as tasks of faith to do our best within our power to provide positive leadership on behalf of our community and those who live and work here, and that our decisions meet the standards of divine compassion for all. Amen.
Thank you all. Has notice been given?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And we need proof of publications. May I get a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner Weiss, a second by Commissioner Flores. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? See that the motion carries unanimously. We knew what you meant. Okay. May I please have the county attorney do the swearing in?
All those wishing to testify, please rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda?
We have no modifications.
Thank you. Would any board member like to pull anything from consent? Since we have no consent, there's nothing to pull. I'm just going down the list here. Okay. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I have a first from Commissioner Powell, a second from the Vice Mayor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? See that it carries 6-0. Postponements or remands, I don't believe we have any of those either. No withdrawals, no consent, so we're going right to the regular agenda. And item B1, Mountain Business Center MUPD.
Yes, DOAW 2024-01074 Mountain Business is a request before the board. There are two requests, one for a development order amendment and the second for a type 2 waiver. Staff is recommending approval. We can turn it over to the applicant for a presentation and followed by staff.
That'd be great. If there's anything that they don't cover, please do so. Thank you.
It's that one, right? Yeah. Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Lauren McClellan with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture, the agent for the applicant. With me today are Eric Deardahl, Corey Potter with Herb Bigger, who's the applicant and contract purchaser for the property and user of the property. The rest of the team here with me here today is Malcolm Butters. He's the owner of the property, as well as Adam Kerr with Kimley Horn. This is a map showing the 14.23 acre site property located at the southeast corner of Atlantic Avenue and State Road 7. And this would be the future land use map, which identifies the property within the industrial corridor of the Atlantic Avenue. The properties in gray have all been designated as industrial. I'll get into that in a minute. And although the property has been farmed for a number of years, it has always been the intent to locate industrial within this corridor. So this is the zoning map. As you can see, most of the parcels within this industrial corridor have already been rezoned to light industrial or to MUPD. And you see this map, there's a residential community to the south. I just want to note that this was approved and developed around 2017, 2018. So just to get into the history of the corridor, it's been designated since 1980 on the comprehensive plan. I've outlined the property there in yellow. To the south of the property was agriculture land. And then when the county later adopted the 1989 comp plan, they maintained that industrial designation and put additional policies in place to protect that industrial corridor as economic development promoter and further discourage changes resulting in a loss of that industrial land. And then again, when the agriculture master plan was adopted in 2000, the county put more policies in place recognizing that this was the industrial corridor within the ag reserve, and it was always intended to be developed with a mix of industrial uses within this property. And so now just a little bit about the applicant before I get into things. The company is an international clean energy manufacturing company, which is a targeted industry by Palm Beach County. Their products are used in vehicles, compressors to improve performance, which ultimately saves energy and reduces emissions. Their corporate offices are currently located in Pompano, and they are relocating out of that Pompano location, hopefully to this property. If not, it will be out of Florida. And then just a little bit more about Herb Baker. As you can see from the picture above, their facility and operations are very clean. The proposed facility will employ over 300 employees. The jobs are high-paying, specialized manufacturing jobs, and the company operates in 3 shifts, so not all of the employees will be within the facility at one time. Just a little bit about the manufacturing process. It involves the delivery of raw steel beams once a week. On a semi-truck, these beams are brought into the facility and the loading doors are closed. As I mentioned, the facility is a clean facility. The employees operating the machinery within the facility are not required to wear ear protection. The machines are not that loud. So again, they receive the materials once per week on truck, and then the materials that they manufacture are shipped out in UPS and FedEx trucks on a daily basis. These are the same trucks that drive around neighborhoods, office parks, downtown streets. So the previous site plan, the current approved site plan, is approved for 2 multi-tenant warehouse buildings that total just under 184,000 square feet. So this plan included 14 loading bays and had approximately 35 bay doors. So it could accommodate 35 tenants, roughly. And the rear setback for that southern building was 74 feet to Dakota, which is the community to the south. The south buffer was 20 feet and included a 60-foot wall. The access to the site is a right-in, right-out on Atlantic Avenue, as well as a right-in and right-out on State Road 7. So this is the proposed site plan. It provides for a single user 197,000 square feet. The site plan provides a larger setback, 104 feet from the residential property to the south. It includes a 12-foot tall wall, which steps down to 6 feet when it's not adjacent to the loading area. Access to the property is the same, a right-in, right-out on State Road 7, a right-in, right-out on Atlantic Avenue. And then you can see in pink, sort of, the 2 small loading areas. So there's only going to be 3 to 5 bay doors for this new project. The applicant is requesting a waiver to allow for extended hours of operation, which is interior to the building only. As the building is located within 250 feet of Dakota, that necessitates the waiver. But there's conditions in place that require it only to be internal to the building, no external activities, no loading outside of typical business hours. And so I just put some conditions of approval up. I've highlighted the important part. Basically, these conditions are protecting adjacent properties. We've agreed to the 12-foot wall. We've agreed to limited loading and outdoor operations. We've agreed to the 12-foot wall. And then I just want to reiterate that the applicant has only 1 truck delivery per week of raw materials, once on a semi, and then the delivery is on FedEx and UPS. So this is a picture of the landscape buffer for Dakota, the residence to the south. This was taken in 2019. I'm sure that it's grown in significantly since 2019 and filled in. And then this is a cross-section. So there is 70 feet in total of landscape buffer between these 2 projects with 2 walls, 6-foot wall for Dakota and then a 12 to 6-foot wall for the subject site. And then just a quick comparison of the current approved and the proposed plans. So the setback has been increased from 74 feet to 104 feet. The currently approved site plan had multi-tenants, approximately 38 bays with different tenants. This is going to be one tenant, one single user. Operationally, the current approved plan has frequent deliveries and trucks coming and going. And then the proposed only has, as I mentioned, one truck delivering, daily trucks that are smaller going out. We've imposed conditions for lighting and the wall height, and then this prior application did not have any of those other protections in place. We do have a letter of no objection from the Delray Alliance. They stated that the project's within the parameters of what the Alliance would expect for a light industrial project within the Ag Reserve. And we did have community outreach. We reached out to the Alliance of Delray this summer. We tried to meet with Dakota also this summer. And then we actually were able to meet with Dakota before the Zoning Commission. And as I mentioned, we have a letter of no objection from the Alliance. Staff recommends approval. The Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval. We respectfully request approval of the two applications. If you have any questions, I am available, as is the team.
All right, I see no lights on, but I will ask staff, is there anything additional that wasn't covered by the petitioner?
Nothing additional.
Thank you. So before we go on, can we do disclosures? So I will start with Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have had verbal communication meeting in my office with Jennifer Morton, Lauren McClellan, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, Malcolm Butters, and Sean Rowan. And that will have no impact on my decision to vote on this project today.
I didn't hear you.
You want me to, I'm sorry, I have had verbal communication via meeting in my office with Jennifer Morton, Lauren McCullen, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, Malcolm Butters, and Sean Rowan, and that will have no impact on my decision based today.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. On this item, I had verbal communications with Lauren McClellan, Jennifer Morton, Eric Deardahl, Corey Potter, Malcolm Butters, and Sean Rowan. I received email correspondence been filed with the clerk.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I've had written communication, which have been filed with the clerk. I've had verbal communication with Jennifer Morton, Lauren McClellan, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, Sean Rowan, and Malcolm Butters, and no site visit.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodward?
Yes, for item number 1, I've had verbal communication with Jennifer Morton, Lauren McClellan, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, Malcolm Butters, and Sean Rowan, and email correspondence that has been filed.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores?
Yes, I've had verbal communications with Jennifer Morton, Lauren McClellan, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, Malcolm Butters, and Sean Rowan.
Thank you. And I have had verbal communications and in-person meetings with Lauren McClellan, Jennifer Morton, Sean Rowan, Corey Potter, Eric Deardahl, and Malcolm Butters, and I've received email communications from Matthew and Monica Belize. And that will be it. Thank you very much. So we've had our disclosures, we've had our presentation, we have no lights on for discussion. May I have a motion and a second, please? Oh, I apologize, we have cards, and then actually, when we do take the motion, there are 2 items. Can we take them together or separately? Okay, thank you. We have 1 or 2?
Actually, 1 on this item.
Okay.
Drew Martin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mayor. I think you should vote no because it's called Mountain Business Center, and there's no mountain anywhere near this. I'm amazed at who comes up with these names. It says Project Hotel. I assume, does that mean the hotel's not going in, or is this incorrect? Or what does hotel mean, a different word in a different language? So this is very confusing. The Sierra Club just thinks that when we pass the bond issue, which we know that the bond does not include all the land in the ag reserve, but the purpose of this was to set aside the ag reserve for an area that would be limited to certain uses. And I don't think the voters ever thought industrial would be one of those uses. Now, originally, I think when the whole idea was if you were going to allow anything commercial, it would be to support the people there. Now, while this is a very nice business, I don't think this supports people in the ag reserve. This is for outside people. This could be anywhere. As we know, it was in Pompano Beach. So, I don't see, I guess I'm going to assume you're going to vote yes, but, I just don't think this was, it really fits in with the ag reserve. It doesn't fit in with the plan for the ag reserve. It doesn't fit in with the idea of what was going to happen there. And while it's a very nice business, and I'm really happy they do things that protect air quality, it will open up the area to more things. Now, originally, I guess they're going to say they're going to use this building for their purposes. However, I doubt there's any restriction that they can't move out anytime they want and turn it over to somebody else who's going to be a lot less clean than these people are. So, in conclusion, I will ask you to vote no. And I appreciate that Commissioner Powell said that his meeting with the individuals would not affect his vote. So I thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate that you have an open mind on this. Appreciate it very much. Have a good day. I have 15 seconds, but I'll leave you 15 seconds for your afternoon.
Do we have another card? That's it? Wonderful.
Mayor, I would like to make the motion
Perfect.
to adopt resolution item 1A and B.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Powell. So we are moving items B, 1A, and B. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See that it carries unanimously. Okay. Now we are on to item B2.
Yes,
Palm Beach Kennel Club.
Item B2, ZVPDDW 2024-00529, the Palm Beach Kennel Club. The application request in front of you includes 3 requests. We have an official zoning map amendment, a type 2 waiver for the hours of operation, and the allowance of an alternative sign plan. And we can turn it over to the applicant, and if needed, staff follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Ellie Zacharias, Miskel Backman, 14 Southeast 4th Street in Boca Raton. I do have a presentation prepared if it is the will of the commission to see it. I just want to thank staff for working very diligently with us and, of course, for their recommendation of approval. We did go to Zoning Commission last week and secured a recommendation of approval from them as well. And we, of course, have Westgate CRA recommendation of approval. So with that, our team is here to answer any questions, again, unless the commission would like to see a full presentation.
Would anyone from the commission like a? Okay, and staff, anything you'd like to add to the presentation that we didn't have?
Nothing beyond what we have in our staff report.
Okay, and we all went over this in our agenda reviews. At this time, I will ask for disclosures. Okay, Commissioner Flores, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I have verbal communication with Matt Forrest.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodward.
Yes, for item 2, I have verbal communication with Cody Crowell, Nick Kelly, Josh Martin, Broderick Erickson, Matt Forrest, Pat Rooney Jr., and Alexis Barbish, and email correspondence that has been filed.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Baxter.
On item number 2, yes, I had written communication. I had verbal communication with Henry Handler, David Martin, Cody Crowell, Matt Forrest, Pat Rooney Jr., and Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. I had verbal communications with Matt Forrest, received email correspondence, been filed with the clerk.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
I've had verbal communication with Matt Forrest.
Thank you. And I have had verbal communication in-person meetings with Matt Forrest, Pat Rooney, and Alexis Barbish. Thank you very much. And we do have cards at this time, so Commissioner Woodward, would you call up our folks?
Alexandria Larson.
This This was the most interesting. I had to swear me in because I was late and I did have a card in on one.
Have you been sworn in?
No, I walked in. I don't know when you did it, dear. I was filling out cards.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Because this was the most unusual agenda. I had to have this emailed to me to get backup. There was no backup for the public. You could not click on the item and open up the backup. You could only open up 1 and 2 this morning. You couldn't even get 3 and 4. Okay, I'm just making you aware. I did call the county attorney's office and made them aware of it because I don't think 3 and 4 should even be on the agenda since we couldn't get the backup. It's just an opinion, but what do I, but I'm worried about it. But anyway, I'll go to this. This is a spot where you guys might, I don't know if you still do, want to put the new county commission building. Is that still in the cards? Okay, because they're changing 5 acres. They're going to do a new casino, and then they're doing residential, which it seems really odd because that's really close to the airport. It'd be really loud, and I know just across the military to the west, they cleaned out a whole neighborhood because of the noise of the airport. So I don't know if this is a null and void for residential. I really don't, because I don't think it works. If the stuff across the military didn't work, it's certainly not going to work next door. Just a little south on Belvedere there. So, I mean, maybe we can go rethink this whole... When you did this agenda originally, I thought it was a waste of time for items that shouldn't have been in front of you guys. Just an opinion. But here we are, we're back again, and we're adopting things and doing things. And quite frankly, I don't know what the Kennel Club is going to do, but as far as residential, I don't know. Maybe somebody could talk to them because you moved a whole little city west of military, too close to the airport, too much noise. Now it's prime industrial land, but this is how it's working in our county, and that gives me great pause because for some reason we're in the mode to mow every piece of tree, grass, anything we got. We're not going to leave it there. We're going to build something else. And I really do. I always ask you to take a pause. Maybe we should take a breath and really do a plan. Hopefully, one of you will make that suggestion someday to make a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other cards? All righty. May I get a motion? So, again, can we adopt all 3 motions at once?
I'll move it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I see no lights on. Oh, Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to go ahead and move item number 2, what would this be? B2, A, B, and C.
Sorry, I'm just reading the agenda. The paper copy I have, and I might have the older version, says recommend approval. Does the version that everybody else has say adopt a resolution?
All 3 say adopt, so item A is adopt a resolution approving item 2A. B is to adopt a resolution approving item 2B, and C is to adopt a resolution approving item 2C.
Okay, those are correct.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss, you want to restate your motion?
I will make a motion to adopt the resolution for B2, A, B, and C.
Thank you. May I have a second? I have a second from Commissioner Woodward. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it carries 6-0. Thank you very much, and we're going to pause. Is this where staff needs a pause so you can reorganize? No? Okay. So now we are going to ULDC revisions, item C3, agricultural marketplace in preserve. This is the second reading and adoption.
Yes, this is our second reading and adoption. The amendment before you is to modify the ULDC to implement changes that were adopted in the comprehensive plan through LGA 2024-003, Ordinance 2024-17. Ultimately, there was an amendment to move land around and add the ag marketplace to a preserve area, so we're implementing those code changes that were already adopted by the board. Staff is recommending approval. Zoning Commission did recommend approval for the consistency as well as the proposed language.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Baxter, Vice Mayor Baxter, your light is on.
Do we have any cards on this item? Then I will wait.
All right, thank you. Our cards, please.
Cards. We have Drew Martin and Alexandria Larson.
Again, Drew Martin on behalf of the Loxahatchee Group of the Sierra Club. And we're very strongly opposed to this because you're moving around preserved land very close to Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge. Really don't think Bender needs this. He made a lot of money when you bought some of his land originally. He has a nice marketplace there. We're not sure why he needs to increase the amount of commercial, which I assume is what this means, since, as Alex said, there's not very much backup. It's a privately proposed amendment, which really shouldn't even be legal, but it is legal because the legislature made them legal. Originally, that would have had to come from the county. Again, we strongly oppose moving a preserve area, doing a preserve area right next to the Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge. This is actually the entry for the Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge. And that, makes it even more serious because now people are going to see more commercial as they drive in instead of agriculture, which is really what the purpose of it is. That's why the sign says, "Welcome to the Palm Beach County Ag Reserve." Thank you.
This should not be on the agenda, Commissioner, since the backup was not available. And I know there was only 16 pages on one and 12 on the other. 3 and 4, I transpose numbers sometimes. I'm a little dyslexic, but we should have the backup, number one. Bednar's, I already said, they had a stand, then they want a store, now they want to put trailers out there, big sheds. And that was on the same day that you all had your panties in a twist about Jupiter because they were going to do something with the park. Arthur Marshall is 147,000 acres, and it starts on Southern and goes to Boca. It is a big, expansive land. It is supposed to be something that we cherish. It really is. We're not supposed to spit on it. I think Bednar's putting a commercial entity that's big in front of the entryway is spitting on it. That's my personal opinion. And, I just don't get it, Commissioners. And truly, without backup being available to the public, it shouldn't be on the agenda. It should be moved or postponed or whatever you want to do. Because that is supposed to be, the backup is supposed to be available like a week before the meeting. You never start a zoning meeting at 1 o'clock. It's 9:30 in the morning. But it was a little unusual. Christmas time is always a lot of fun here. But another item I hated started around Christmas time years ago. And by the grace of God, it didn't come to my world. They stuck it somewhere else. And I didn't want it stuck in anybody else's world either. But please take a look at the Arthur Marshall, because I think they ought to have a nice monument sign that says, "This is the Arthur Marshall. Welcome to this wonderful place." Because I think of the Corbett and the Arthur Marshall is special. It's somewhere you can take the kids and they can see sandhill cranes, wildlife, whatever. And it's there, and we should respect it. And it even says in the back up here, reserve, preserve. So I don't know where you put the Arthur Marshall in there, but I think it is a preserve and a reserve. And the Bednars should have just a little respect for the land that they're sitting in front of, just a little.
Thank you. Commissioner Baxter, you had your light on.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to make the motion to approve item 3. Motion to adopt an ordinance approving item 3.
And Commissioner Weiss, your light is on.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and make a second, but I did want to address why we're having the meeting today at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that is because we had originally scheduled another meeting that had to be moved due to to allow us to attend the service for the 3 deputies that were killed in the county.
Thank you. So I have a motion from the Vice Mayor. I have a second from Commissioner Weiss. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? See that it carries 6-0. We are now going to D, other items. And this is where we're having take a moment to let people move around. So while they're doing that, this is an MUPD public civic dedication policy and public civic sites nearby Central Park Commerce Center, MUPD. We are not seeking a motion. This is just giving staff direction. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I'm Eric McClellan. I serve as the Director of the Strategic Planning Division for the county's Facilities Development and Operations Department. Today, I'm accompanied by a number of colleagues that are in the audience, as well as on the dais, who are going to assist me with answering any questions that might be best answered by others. This item does respond to board direction at the November 21st zoning hearing to review the Multiple Use Plan Development District, or MUPD, Public Civic Dedication Policy. And at the same time, direction was given to present public civic sites nearby the Center Park Commerce Center MUPD property at the same time. To start, I do want to emphasize that the pending Central Park applications are not the subject of this item today, as they were postponed to January 30th and were not advertised as items for discussion today. Rather, as directed, this is a high-level look at policy, regulations, and practice, and a specific geographic area. Although I can promise to be more direct in speaking to those applications when we come back in January. To accomplish direction, I'll start with some general background information on public civic obligations, as well as the evaluation process, namely to benefit our new commissioners and for overall context. I'm then going to present the Unified Land Development Code, or ULDC language, applicable to public civic dedications and the MUPD district, and we'll hear from county attorney representatives on legal considerations. From there, I will give specific attention to applicable MUPDs and then identify public civic site dedications in the vicinity of the Central Park MUPD. Then we'll have opportunity for questions and answers, board discussion, and direction. So what is a civic pod or site? The language on this slide is verbatim from Article 3E of the Unified Land Development Code governing plan developments. As you can see, a civic site or pod is a portion of a plan development affording a coordinated land planning approach for delivering civic, institutional, educational, and recreation uses. Balance is key, as these sites are intended for long-range public service facilities, even when need today may not be visible, forecast, certain, or known. So these sites are an essential strategy for fulfillment of public service demands and needs long into the future, when land may no longer be available in the vicinity of our larger land development projects. Where 2% of the gross acreage yields 1.5 acres or more, which mathematically translates to a planned development project of 75 or more acres, a civic obligation is public in the land area conveyed to the county with infrastructure connections and capacity reservation, along with other protections to ensure their development readiness. Public civic dedications are utilized to deliver government agency facilities required for level of service or to mitigate other impacts of development. Private civic sites, on the other hand, are not conveyed to the county and are used for privately owned civic facilities, such as private schools, daycares, or places of worship. The public civic policy has existed in Palm Beach County zoning regulations since 1973 and has been refined over time. The original 2% requirement applied only to planned developments of more than 100 acres. That translated to civic sites of 2 acres or more each, but over time, projects exceeding 100 acres became less common. As a result, in 1992, the regulation changed to a standing 2% of gross acreage, with the potential of the site being designated public for conveyance to the county or private for uses deemed applicable to the developer or homeowner association. In 2011, we established the 2% as a public obligation when that yields 1 1/2 acre, because from experience, we know there is no public facility that FD&O delivers that is feasible on anything less, taking into account building footprints, setbacks, stormwater management, landscaping, parking, and all other land development regulations. This again makes 75 acres the threshold for project size for generating a public civic obligation. I have stated to past boards that this policy and planning tool has been a landmark regulation for county facilities. We simply could not keep pace with the private sector in assembling, negotiating, and acquiring lands to fulfill our public facility needs and level of service standards without this approach and opportunity being in place. There are other practical considerations that have informed and influenced the civic obligation and that apply to our real estate program overall. With ownership comes maintenance and maintenance responsibility, both performance and cost, and the assumption of liability and risk. We are also constantly mindful of the tax roll implications that comes with government ownership of land. So we exercise constraint and we act with good intentions at all time, be that for the present or future. Today, public civic obligations are required of applicable residential planned unit developments, or PUDs, mobile home plan developments, or MHPDs, traditional town developments, or TTDs, and development order amendments, or DOAs, to each of those. Public civic obligations are optional for MUPDs, planned industrial park developments, or PIPDs, and traditional neighborhood developments, or TNDs, as I continue the alphabet soup. No obligations or regulatory allowance is available for recreation vehicle plan developments, or RVPDs, and traditional marketplace developments, or TMDs. We always look to consolidate or co-locate public civic sites rather than fragmenting their obligations into pieces. Obviously, larger parcels are more conducive to site design and accommodating varied programming than are multiple small sites. All of this together has yielded the county civic sites that range in size from our 1.5 acre minimum to as large as 43.69 acres in the case of the Canyon Holdings in West Boynton Beach. That was a land bank created in partnership with GL Homes as an alternative to numerous smaller sites. We do have standard form conditions of approval that are applied and tailored to each application so that dedicated sites are conveyed in a time, form, and manner that aligns with the county needs and again assures development potential. This slide is going to take us back a few months to recent board direction on use of PUD civic sites for workforce or affordable housing. Although focus at that time was centered on obligations originating from residential PUDs, I did think it worthwhile to summarize the conclusions for the benefit of our new commissioners to ensure no confusion with today's focus, and as a general reminder, should the board identify any parallels. First, those sites located outside of the urban-suburban tier will not be candidates for housing. Those sites within the urban-suburban tier will be used to support government facilities, workforce or affordable housing, or foregone with a cash equivalent contribution. That decision will be rendered on a case-by-case basis and concurrent with board consideration of the associated development order. When cash out is the preferred approach, for lack of an identified or forecasted need, the amount will be established by appraisal supplied by the applicant. Those proceeds will then be used towards county government facilities, workforce or affordable housing in the project area, or a facility providing county-wide service. So while the ULDC is the vehicle to secure civic sites, established policy is followed in implementing those regulations. As you can see noted on this slide, Countywide Policy and Procedure Memoranda, or PPM, L-023, addresses all things real estate, civic sites included. This includes consideration of existing or projected future needs for county departments and constitutional offices, participating in the regulatory review process for applications generating a public civic obligation, determining if dedication, exchange, or cash out is most optimal, and preparing the appropriate conditions of approval. From experience, I will tell you that the ultimate assignment of a use or uses to a public civic site requires a combination of institutional knowledge, familiarity with growth plans, siting considerations, outreach and coordination with departments and agencies, and of course, with administration and elected officials. So now for some real-life examples of public civic sites in order of the year that they were established. The Artistry Lakes PUD, which was formerly known as Lake Haven and Crest Haven on State Road 80 in District 6, was recently approved and will convey 8.92 acres. We're going to take a closer look at that one momentarily. Fire Station number 49 is currently under construction in District 5 in West Boynton Beach on a 2.89 acre public civic site. Fire Station Number 22 in Westlake was constructed on land conveyed to fulfill public civic obligations of that development order. Land for a future district park remains held in the Arden community, also on State Road 80 in District 6, and we'll again be taking a closer look at that one shortly. The PBSO District 1 Substation and Marine Unit joint facility that is now under construction on Jog Road in District 2 was obligated in 2002 and held in county ownership since 2007. We hold 9.47 acres of the Melrose community on State Road 7 in District 5 that has potential for use by fire rescue and other programming. So with all of the other approvals that have yet to be implemented, the applications that are currently pending review, and the 51 years of history since 1973, time simply doesn't allow me to sit here and identify all of the sites. That all leads up to the moment you've all been waiting for. This is the slide that presents the express language of the ULDC regarding public civic dedications from an MUPD. You'll see it begins with, quote, "The BCC may require," not Eric McClellan, not FDNO, but the BCC. With this language, staff should be looking at project acreage, development intensity, public service and facility impacts, and other project-specific factors to identify where reasonable balance creates opportunities that should be brought to the board's attention as a matter of professional duty, public service, public policy, and best practice. Through review of historic documents, we were able to find that this language originated from BCC direction in 2005 and it was adopted in 2006. We were not able to identify the impetus for the direction other than placing another tool in the toolbox for long-range facility planning. Language setting forth the reason for the amendment and summarizing same did indicate that the requirement would apply where impacts necessitate a civic dedication and subject to the requirement that a clear rational nexus be demonstrated between the proposed use and a required civic dedication. With all of that, I would like to provide the county attorney's office with an opportunity to comment on legal aspects of a required public dedication.
Thanks, Eric. Under federal law, federal and state law, an exaction is when the government conditions a land use approval on dedication of private property to public use. And these are permissible where there is an essential nexus between a legitimate governmental interest and the exaction dedication, and the dedication is roughly proportional in nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development. The government bears the burden of showing that a proposed exaction meets this test. The test aims to consider whether dedications demanded as development conditions are proportional to the development's anticipated impacts. To satisfy the first prong, the county must show that the exaction furthers a legitimate governmental purpose. The county may look to state law, its charter, comprehensive plan, or ordinances to show a legitimate governmental purpose. To satisfy the second prong, there is no precise mathematical calculation required. Rather, the county must make an individualized determination that the required dedication is related both in nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development. In other words, is the dedication related to and proportional to the anticipated impacts of the proposed development? Does it remedy the problems caused by the proposed development? And the proof provided by the county must be more than just bare conclusions. There has to be some factual basis behind it. Can you repeat that? The end? That the evidence doesn't have to be mere conclusions. There has to be some factual basis behind it.
Thank you very much for that, Darren.
Hold on one second.
Continue, I'll just.
Okay. Commissioner Woodward, you have a question now, or?
I can come back.
Okay.
Okay, so to continue, admittedly, this is not routine of our practice and experience with MUPDs. But looking at MUPD approvals since this language was enacted, there have only been 5 that met the 75-acre threshold that would generate our minimum 1.5-acre obligation. This slide identifies 3 of the 5 of 75 or more acres. The first is limited solely to an auto auction in an area of the urban-suburban tier that is largely industrial in nature and is well covered by public services. Square footage is relatively low, and a Palm Trans stop exists along the site's Sandsbury Way frontage. The other 2 sites on this slide are in the agricultural reserve, where it is the required preserve area that drives those to exceed the 75-acre threshold. By code, only the developable acreage is subject to the 2% dedication standard. So these are effectively nullified as any equal comparison. Next, we have the Palm Beach Industrial MUPD, or former Moroso property. Its statistical characteristics are comparable to that of the Central Park Commerce Center MUPD. Major differences are: 1, the more remote location when looking to surrounding lands; 2, a complete absence of existing and planned Palm Trans service on Beeline Highway north of Haverhill Road; and 3, the EDC future land use only applies to Central Park Commerce Center MUPD. So by doing a compare and contrast of the 5 applicable projects, you can see that they have vastly different characteristics and exist in vastly different surroundings, despite sharing the MUPD zoning in common. Simply put, not all are equal. Now I'm going to switch gears a bit and give attention to the other subject that was board direction in reviewing the established public civic sites nearby the Central Park Commerce Center property. This slide shows the Southern Boulevard corridor from the intersection of Seminole Pratt Whitney Road to the east and County Road 880 to the west. The existing 138 acres of the Central Park Commerce Center with EDC future land use and MUPD zoning is shown here in the darker green. And the 64.46 acre proposed expansion is shown in the lighter or lime green. Just east of the South Florida Water Management District L8 Canal is the Arden PUD, shown here in orange. And just to the east of that is the Artistry Lakes PUD, shown here in red. This slide presents the location of the Arden PUD and its approved master plan. The roughly 1,210 acre site is approved for 2,334 dwelling units, a 6.33 acre commercial pod for 50,000 building square feet, and customary areas of supportive infrastructure. The site required a limited urban service area, or LUSA designation, and future land use amendment upon approval in 2004. While the 2% civic dedication translated to 24.2 acres, a total of 60.83 acres were dedicated. This includes a 15.66 acre dedication to the school district for an elementary school that is now under construction, a 25.03 acre dedication to Palm Beach County that is identified here in yellow and being held for a future district park, 16.4 acres comprised of a 50-foot wide public trail corridor along the west and north perimeters of the site, indicated here in the dashed green line, and a separate 3.74 acre dedication to the county that is reflected in solid green that is being held for a future public trailhead to support connectivity between the aforementioned public trail and a planned multi-use paved trail of at least 10 feet in width beyond, which is intended for pedestrians, cyclists, and equestrians. This future trail is commonly known as the North Everglades Natural Area, or NENA, Everglades Rim Trail, which is a collaborative long-range vision of the county's Parks and ERM departments, Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, FDOT, FDEP, and other agencies. The 25.3 acre holding for the district park, shown here in yellow, is no coincidence. By comprehensive plan definition, a district park is generally greater than 25 acres in size and primarily provides active recreational facilities such as lighted fields or courts, exercise trails, supportive facilities, parking areas, and potential special recreation facilities. Parks of this type serve an area within a 5-mile radius, where by comparison, a regional park would serve a much larger radius and demand 150 or more acres for programming. The Parks and Recreation Department will look to utilize impact fees as a primary funding source for facility delivery, which ties to both county charter and ULDC provisions for use of impact fees towards district parks. This park is not yet programmed in the 5-year capital improvement program due to other needed and awaited improvements demanding resources, although this facility is necessary to fulfill level of service into the future. Next door to Arden, to the east, is the approved Artistry Lakes PUD, which is the focus of this slide. This site, too, required a LUSA designation and future land use amendment. The property is 446.14 acres in size and approved for 534 dwelling units, a commercial pod supporting 47,000 building square feet, and area for supportive infrastructure. The 2% civic obligation will deliver an 8.92 acre site that is identified here in yellow, and that on the approved master plan is planned to support a fire rescue station as well as a branch library, which is believed to be feasible through thoughtful site design and good planning. Regarding the fire station, fire rescue continues budgeting funds each year, including $2 million in the current fiscal year towards building the facility's capital fund. Additional $3 million allocations are planned for each of the approaching several years. We would anticipate that facility being sited along the site's southern boulevard frontage for emergency departure operations, serving the entire service area, and that has been identified as the most optimal long-range siting solution. The branch library, on the other hand, is a long-range reservation and seen as a compatible siting opportunity within this residential community. The library system will budget funds once other standing priorities and needs have been accomplished, which is likely a decade or more into the future. So as we're
Hold on a
seeing this
second.
area
Hold on a
urbanized-
second, Eric. I've actually got a lot of lights on.
Okay.
And I think maybe, no, I've got your order. So Vice Mayor Baxter, you actually had your light on first. Would you like to ask your questions?
Yes. Seeing as how what we're talking about is in my district, I wanted to go first, so thank you, Mayor.
Go right ahead.
The civic site that we're talking about, and Eric, I'm going to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind, before I ask my questions of moving forward. What is it that you want us to give you direction? What is the direction seeking?
Really not seeking any direction, to be specific. We were asked to bring the policy to the board, and we were asked to bring the other sites to the board. We're looking any direction you might want to give us regarding our review, our evaluation, the typical process. This is just fulfilling your direction.
So I mean, this is a lot of information, so I appreciate the hard work put into this. That doesn't escape me. I think the policy itself is fine. I mean, to the point of it even says, BCC may require. What I find interesting is that there's no residential sites being proposed or residential anything for this site, and yet we have, I did the math briefly, 28.77 acres within a quarter mile of this site, of civic unused. I mean, it's supposed to be a park, it's supposed to be a public trailhead, but even just saying that out loud, let's assume that's what we use those for. A public trailhead could also be a great place for a Palm Tran stop to end at. I don't think a Palm Tran stop ending at Palm Beach Aggregates or a rock mine makes much sense. So overall, I would like to give direction that this not be a requirement of this particular project, but leaving the policy itself alone. I don't agree with having a Palm Tran site in the middle of a rock mine. I apologize. That just doesn't make sense to me. And also, I love the idea of it. If you have to put it somewhere, putting it at a trailhead, because then people might want to go there. And that's really what my statements mostly are. But overall, if this is the policy and that's the way it is and it is up to us, I'm okay with that. But I think, again, it needs to be done on an individual per site basis, and I don't think we need to get into the weeds of changing any policies. So I would just, again, direction that I would like to give without objection is just that we don't require it of this site.
Thank you. And I am going to let our attorney jump in.
Sure, and that would be appropriate when we actually get to the January 30th meeting to either approve or deny that policy decision. But staff is now aware of if the board ultimately says that they're fine with the policy as it is, I think that sends a message to staff, and they can determine whether or not they'd like to proceed moving forward on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodward, you had your light on next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of points I wanted to clarify, and I'll go to the end of my questions first. PUDs versus MUPDs. The PUDs, we do not have to identify the use when the civic pod is dedicated. Is that correct?
Yes and no. No, from the standpoint the code doesn't require that of us. Yes, in the standpoint that's the direction you gave us when we met on PUD civic site several months ago. You wanted staff to identify that, disclose it to the board, and allow the board to make the decision at the same time as considering the development order, what to do with that civic site. To hold it, to cash it out, or to exchange it for some other land offering.
But we have a number of PUDs that exist right now, or a number of pods that exist from PUDs that go back several years that, I think it was one 1979, I believe I saw.
That's correct.
That's not being used. So I take it at that time, nothing was identified. We just said, take these 9 acres. But when it comes to MUPDs, the policy has always been, we have to identify the use.
No,
Or-
the policy is that you may or you may not decide to take it. And again, the only time.
But if we decide to take it, we have to identify the use.
We have to show that there's insufficient facilities for this particular development that's moving forward. So we would have to identify where we have insufficient facilities caused by that proposed
And
development.
it has to be impacted by that development.
That development.
The MUPD. But that's not the case with PUDs, right? That's just the overall general area. Okay, so going back to, there were, on page 10, slide 10, we have 3 MUPDs, and I know that they're not all in the same area. How are these determined to be, what was the nexus provided for these, and what's the use?
None of these provide a public civic dedication.
So
These are just MUPDs that would meet the acreage threshold, of the 1.5 acres for a request to be raised. There was no need identified, there was no use identified. These do not provide for a public civic dedication,
do we have a current MUPD anywhere in the county that does?
not to my knowledge.
This would be the first?
This would be the first to my knowledge.
Okay, and it is on us to prove that the need comes from that development, whatever that development is.
That is correct. And as staff, as I would be the one making the recommendation, that burden is on me to demonstrate to you the reasons, the rationale, the justification, the analysis. And as I think I said to another commissioner in a briefing, you then get to play judge and jury.
Okay, and that is what will be coming back to us when this comes in January. And also, just
to clarify too, the policy from FDNO is the 2%, but it is not in the code. It could be more, it could be less. So.
But whatever it is would have to have nexus.
Correct. So the projects that Eric is showing are those projects that are over to warrant a 1.5 acre property. But the MUPD language itself leaves it to the discretion of the board. It could be a 30-acre MUPD, but they're showing, 200 residential units along with commercial, and it's warranting a, let's say, an outstation for a police or something that might not necessarily need to be on 1.5 acres. So it's
Okay.
at the discretion of the board.
Well, I would agree with the vice mayor at this time. You've got your work cut out for you in January, I think, on proving nexus on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I was going to ask Mr. McClellan, and I think Commissioner Woodward kind of got into it, but to just explain between this site and other sites, the idea of a rational nexus, an essential nexus, and then rough proportionality between this site, or what we would be looking at what is being considered as a subject site, and previous sites.
So that's really the site-specific analysis that I will come back with in January. Since it is not the subject of today's meeting, this is the policy, not the site-specific implementation and request. I'm a little bit reluctant, and I honestly haven't fully prepared to address that for purposes of this agenda item. But I will be ready in January.
Thank you. Follow up? With regard to that, I guess the question is, and Commissioner Woodward brought it up and you indicated that there's been no previous sites that have been required to do this. I guess my question is are there any sites that currently have, or any planned unit developments or any types of PDs that have civic sites that were required that had some type of nexus or rationale behind it? I know there's some things that require some type of specific uses sometimes is there, I guess my question is there a reason or a rationale to some of these other PUDs that are required to have certain elements that may not have a reason, right? For example, you may have an extremely large planned development that requires park benches every so many feet. Is there something behind all of that, or is that something that is outside the scope of what we're looking at today?
Might be a little bit outside the scope, but let me attempt to address that, because I think it comes back to the question Commissioner Woodward asked, and is there a fundamental difference between the PUD and MUPD? From a policy standpoint, there is. In the PUD district, it's established that when you meet that acreage threshold to generate 1.5 acres for a public dedication, it's an automatic. MUPD is a little more board discretion. And I would suggest the reason why it's very rare we see an MUPD of that acreage. We're talking very large projects. And that's why we could only find 5 that would even have met the acreage size to generate that 1.5 acre commitment. So as staff, it really is a site-specific evaluation. You have to look at the size of the project, you have to look at the impacts, the intensity of the use, the nature of the use, the surrounding environment, a whole host of issues. It's not simply a one-size-fits-all approach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McClellan, we were going to hear this case and was put on postponement. So I actually find it disingenuous for you to sit here today and tell me you are not ready to speak about that particular case, because it was on our agenda. And so you would have had to been ready back then. So I am going to ask you again to please speak specifically to that.
Clarify my statement if I can, and I apologize. At the November meeting, you postponed the pending applications to January. So they were not advertised for this meeting. They will be advertised for January. The request that we were given, the direction we received was bring back the policy, to talk about the policy. That's what I was trying to address today. And I was...
My fellow commissioner asked you specifically about this, and I'm asking you. Let's talk about that one.
Okay, before we do that, I'm going to interrupt for a second.
I have more questions.
I realize that, but this action, the action on this specific item was not noticed, so I don't feel it's appropriate that we...
I'm not going to rule on the item.
Okay, all right, I'm just putting that out there. That we can continue the discussion. I'm not stopping the discussion. I just want to make sure that because it wasn't noticed, that we were going to be voting anything specific on that item.
I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to ask to vote on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Weiss, you want to continue?
So how many other MUPDs have been subject to this ULDC language?
None that we're aware of.
If any, what public facility shortfall and how was property used to address that shortfall?
In this specific instance, I'm not sure I understood the question.
So you're saying that there aren't any, did you ever review them for any public shortfall on these other cases that you brought forward?
Me personally, I did not. I was not in the capacity at the time.
Did anybody from staff ever review them?
They all go through the same review process.
Did they get reviewed for inclusion of a civic site and reviewed for the need?
That would be part of the standard review process. I can't speak for the others that performed it, but it would be standard practice.
Do you have any documentation on that?
I do not, and in fact, I asked if the applicant, in the case of the Central Park, knew why there wasn't an ask when they originally came through, and they were not aware either.
I'm not asking about Central Park, I'm asking about these other applications you brought forward.
Repeat the question, I'm sorry, I'm not
Do you have any documentation that there was in fact a review done specifically in the need or the request of reviewing for an MUPD to dedicate a civic site?
Any of them reviewed since the language went into effect in 2000 would have, it's standard practice. I was not the one personally.
You have the documentation, that's my question.
I have no documentation.
Okay,
no.
Thank you. For planning, Describe prior FLUA amendments that have a condition of approval requiring land dedication for public purpose.
Yes, Commissioner. What we typically do is before we get the amendment, we get an assessment of the level of impact, because the way that your comp plan works is we've looked at the entire county. If it builds out at the intensities of the land use is projected, what do you need? So you're only looking at the increment of the change on a given parcel for what is the impact of that? Does it then trigger? So it's somewhat baked in. Typically, when we see parcels of 30, 40 acres, they don't typically trigger anything like that. The parcels that we've seen in the project we've seen have been the very big ones. Some of those are on that list. Minto West was one of those. That was almost 4,000 acres. We saw Indian Trail Groves. Those actually caused impacts sufficient because there was an insane number of rooftops and square footage that was, they were going to cause impacts. They were addressed then. They were programmed into the policy language because they were effectively one-off approvals because there were unique circumstances associated with each. So they were there. But the smaller ones, they typically go through the process. We don't see anything usually untowards. The analysis is there. They typically do not cause failures that would, necessitate things like fire stations. And if they do, we generally know things like a fire station. We already know where that should be. And so you typically get that through a zoning process. But we do assess it at comp plan.
Has any legal analysis been conducted to determine whether this policy imposes any undue burden on property owners?
So the MUTD policy, specifically, if you read it, it parrots the language from the rational nexus test. So let me see, which slide is it on? So it requires that a portion of gross acreage of the development be dedicated to PBC for public purposes when insufficient facilities are available to allow for the provision of government services required for the proposed development. So that's the language that has to be satisfied in order for the dedication to be valid under our code, and that would be similar to the requirement of the two-part test. So they'd have to meet that two-part test. The board would have to make that determination.
Okay. Can somebody describe examples of insufficient facilities to allow for the provision of government services required for the proposed development?
I can in the case of the Central Park, if I may. I'd like to make sure County Attorney's Office is comfortable responding to the application.
Nothing said today can be used as a basis for making a decision. So the concern is that if you discuss something, it would either have to be repeated almost verbatim or somehow separated out from that discussion. So you can't describe anything else other than the Central Park, which you didn't want to discuss previously. Is that what you're saying?
That is an application I personally have reviewed pursuant to the policy that I presented and that we discussed. And if you would like to hear it, I am happy to go through some of the findings that I made. I actually had a memo that was part of the staff report for the November hearings that were postponed. That does include the analysis and how I arrived at the recommendation.
I just think this is a bad idea. I think this is setting a terrible precedent without having public input, and at this point, I agree with my colleague. This should not even be presented to us next time. I don't want to hear it.
I'm going to recognize Commissioner Baxter. Vice Mayor Baxter. She has a question for the attorney.
For the attorney, yes. So because this hasn't been publicly noticed, we're not trying to decide on whether we're approving the overall item or not. Is there a distinguishable difference between saying we want to leave out the requirement of a civic site? Does that impact the overall vote on the entire item?
So here's what I think you can do. You can give staff direction regarding the policy. The policy as it is, first of all, is that language right up there in the code. And not to get into specifics, but the Central Park item actually is going beyond what's in that policy because the acreage they're asking for is more than what that would allow. So if you say that's the policy that you want, I think that's pretty clear direction to staff. And of course, they can, bring it forward at their own, determination. But I think if staff gets clear direction on your, consideration of this policy, I think that would be good.
So follow-up, Mayor? Oh, absolutely. So just by saying we want to stick to what the current policy says would preclude it from coming back?
It wouldn't. I mean, that's more of staff is able to make recommendations, in their capacity as reviewers. So you ultimately have the decision when it comes before you, if staff so chooses to include something, if there's something that you wanted to make a permanent policy, as in like a prohibition on something, I think that would need to be included either in the comp plan or the ULDC. But as that is the policy that stands, I think that direction to staff gives them something to chew on before the next meeting.
Which part of this, in your opinion, I guess, is what is not kind of in, what doesn't comply with the policy?
Not going to get into specifics on the rational nexus part, but specific to Central Park, I believe the acreage that is being requested is beyond the acreage that's mentioned up there, the gross. And I'll let Eric talk about that.
And what are the acres being requested?
So approximately 61 acres is proposed for addition to the existing 132 acres. So end of the day, roughly 200 overall. To build upon Scott's comment, the ULDC language typically says you apply the regulations to the affected area, which would just be the additional land area that's being added. If you look at this language, it talks about the project. And at the land use level and at the zoning level, they are adding to the project. I see it being that's how the board has some discretion in this case. Do you want to apply 2% to the whole thing? Do you want to apply 2% to a portion of it? Do you not want to apply it at all?
What is staff currently applying it to?
We are currently applying it to the overall as a function.
To the whole almost 200 plus acres?
As a function of our review, looking at comprehensive plan policies.
And so that making the total acres,
roughly 4 acres. And when we're talking about a transit facility, the way we arrived at the 4 acres is a function of the maneuverability of those larger vehicles.
And what's the minimum amount of acres in an MUPD that we can even require the percentage?
75.
And they're actually...
Correct. Eric keeps bringing up the 2%, but I just want to clarify that the code does not reference 2% for MUPDs. It gives staff the discretion that if you have a smaller site and there is a rational nexus and insufficient facilities available, they could ask for a 1 acre site or a portion of a building for a police substation or something that might be necessary and not on 1.5 acres.
Okay,
it doesn't say 1.5.
So the 61 acres are not even meeting the 75 acre requirement. And the only way that we're even able to even consider this is if we apply it to the 100 plus other acres.
Correct. If we applied it just to the 60 solar acres that are proposed, and we use the 2% as the standard, it's, kind of what's been the standard, the norm for a long time, it really doesn't render any land area that would support a transit facility.
So if there was a policy, and I'll hear from my board, I would say that I would like us not to be able to allow to add to already existing. That solves this whole issue, because then we're stuck with just 61 acres. It's under the 75. Because I don't think that's right to then say, okay, you already have 100 plus acres, but we're just going to take it as a sum total. So if I were to give direction, and I'll see what my board has to say, I think that might solve this problem of let's only apply this percentage to the current project in front of us, not the existing that's already been approved.
You can certainly give that direction. I would like to say that in addition to just the zoning text in this case, we're also dealing with a land use change and other policy changes to our comprehensive plan. So they're looking to change the vision of the future for this piece of property. And it's a vision that's different than what we've ever planned for. So we are taking a large look, a very long-range look at this project, and that's how we've arrived at the recommendation. So it's not solely based upon the zoning text. It's also a function of the comprehensive plan amendment needed to support the zoning.
I'll hear from my other board members. Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to recognize Attorney Stone.
Sure. So to your point, Vice Mayor, as far as policy goes, the reason, and I'll back up, again, without getting into specifics, this request is being done through the comp plan amendment, not through a development order by itself. The reason is because it goes beyond the language that's there. So if any policy is being made, it would be in denial of the condition when it comes back to you, because again, these are all case-by-case basis. The fact that one hasn't been done before, this could be a unicorn, it could be the only time. So you will have the opportunity to make that policy call when it comes back in January as part of the comp plan amendment condition, if it is still included as part of that when it comes back.
Okay, everybody's lights are on. So in the order that they were on, Commissioner Flores, you are next.
I was going to try to stay quiet, but I want to talk about policy rather than this specific project. I'm concerned that this body and future bodies thereafter us have to properly plan to provide services to these areas. And it has to be a collaborative effort, because the further west we get, the less infrastructure we have in place. And I think it's going to require, getting civic sites given to us to be able to provide those services to our constituents and to the residents. This morning at TPA, we heard complaints from the folks in Arden because the infrastructure out there is not robust. So we have to plan properly in how we proceed forward, and I'm talking about policy here. And how we do that, we have to make determination. So I don't want to make, that determination about a project as opposed to what's being done right here, right now, because what's going to prevent a future development to start dividing the land or projects into phases so that they don't have to provide the 2% or the 1.5 acres that we may require. So I think that's a slippery slope. I am not a big fan of the word may require. I think it's either we do or we don't. But it does give us flexibility. I like applying, if it's, it should require instead of may, but that's just a whole different conversation. But to me, that's a concern because we have to plan properly for the future. And I think a lot of the development that's going to happen in this county is probably going to end up being, west, and then we're going to have to provide services. And you mentioned Arden, they gave what, 27 acres for a park? Am I correct?
A little over 25.
Okay.
In addition to other parcels.
Well, at the Tuesday meeting at the Master Plan for Parks and Rec, she showed us a slide where we're going to have a deficit in parks and different departments, and they have to get creative on the way that they're going to be, try to provide more services to our residents. So we're staring at a deficit in our parks and recs as it is. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do as a board, but I think this has to be a collaborative effort between government and developers and people that are coming forward, because at the end of the day, the expectation is that the county is going to have to provide services to the residents, whether it's transportation, parks, whatever it may be. We have to figure out that solution. I do have a question about the whole cash out. Can you explain that to me a little bit in more detail?
Sure. That's a concept or a approach to PUD civic obligations. In certain instances, there will be a project that will come through, and it's an area that's already well served by public facilities. We've got everything covered. We don't foresee or anticipate any future need for that land. It's at the discretion of the applicant or the developer. Do they still want to give us the land, which they're entitled to do, or give us a cash equivalent in lieu of giving us the land?
So, and I might be getting things confused here. I'm still on the
that'll be my fault. I've thrown a lot at you today.
Is this the same program as the housing, when they're developing and they have to allocate a percentage for housing, or am I?
Concept is the same, but two entirely different
Okay,
subject
that's-
matters.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Patrick, you had your light on.
Thank you, Mayor. And Commissioner Flores touched on it. I just wanted to reinstitute the uniqueness of this provision. It's a may, which is problematic in a sense, but because it's not a strict mathematical equation like you have in PDs, that's what makes this unique. I think the policy piece we're looking for, we've identified it. It's been brought forward on what will be a forthcoming application, one that you have seen, but wanted to ensure that we're following through on this provision if the direction is to continue to handle it on a case-by-case basis, kind of like where we landed on the civic discussions with PUDs a few months ago on the ultimate disposal of it. That's fine, that's great, we're getting to that point. We have an obligation to bring this forward and identify it for you, but no argument whatsoever. This one presents differently and uniquely than others, but that's probably that policy piece that we would look for from the board. Do you want us to still continue bringing them forward and identify it, give you the analysis, and the board will chime in? That's the downside of the may part of it.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell, I have you, then Commissioner Weiss, then Commissioner Woodward, and then Vice Mayor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concern is when it comes to projects, and not even talking about the subject property or the subject site that has led to this discussion, the challenge is, Commissioner Flores brought it up, the BCC may require. And while we're discussing the opportunity to potentially change language of the code, may does not necessarily mean that we have to require. The challenge I see is, and Mr. McKellen, you brought it up, and I don't want to talk about something that is not before us, but I'm almost forced to based on what we're looking at, is, a project goes through these phases of approval, and then something is missed that may be applied, should have been applied in the code, but wasn't, and then the applicant continues to move forward, and they say, well, you know what, let's add something to the project, and then we come back to the county and we go, you know what? Either there's a new planner or a new project manager that missed it the first time and goes, we're gonna apply this to the whole thing. And that kind of throws off what the applicant was originally working on. And I don't see how that is allowed, right? Because, if you've developed a project and now you're coming back in to change a condition or do development order amendment to add additional land or add something to it, to go back and say, well, you know what? We haven't done this for any other projects. We missed it. Now we're going to come back and require you as a condition of approval to do something. It becomes challenging for the applicant. It becomes challenging for staff who may have worked on the project before. It becomes challenging for us who sit as a board because now you're looking at the history of the project. I don't know as a board if we want to touch the language that says may require and change that to shall or get rid of it completely. That's something that we probably should have a larger discussion on. But I think the way it is right now, it gives us discretion. And without going into what we think we should do or giving an opinion on the proposed subject property in the future, I just want to be cognizant that Mayor Flores, Commissioner Flores indicated that, we are in challenging times where there's things that we do need in terms of continuing to grow. They said at the FACT conference that there's 1,000 people coming to Florida a day. That number has increased to 1,200. And we have to make sure that we're cognizant and making sure that we're growing smart, correctly, and we're sustainable. So it's just my point of reference. It says may require. It gives us the discretion, and if it's direction moving forward, we as a board should look at that and make a decision as to, do we want to require that on a project-by-project basis, or look at this particular project and think of the idea that, prior to the 61 acres being added, this wasn't the proposed project, the subject project in the future. was not a requirement. So those are the things that I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of and aware of as we continue to move forward. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. I want to also echo, I think, in what Commissioner Flores said. I mean, when you're looking at MUPD, right, so they can include, it can include residential and commercial type activities or development. And in that case, there's a rational nexus to be made as to the impact it would have or the needs that it might generate. And so in that regard, I don't want to say that we change the entire policy, but I think what caused me a lot of grief on this is you have a data center and you're trying to claim the nexus of a transit operation for a facility. I mean, if you said, okay, we need a power plant or we need a plant for, water or whatever that facility might need, that would make some sense to me. But a bus stop for a data center, as Vice Mayor Baxter said, a bus stop over by the trailhead, that makes sense. Maybe, you could justify that. I just find this is, honestly, I think it, and as Commissioner Powell said, this was imposed on them long after they brought it. If somebody's building trying to develop a project, and then we say, okay, all of a sudden at the 12th hour, we say, okay, we need this now because, maybe we forgot or we didn't know, or then that means they have to redesign their whole project, and maybe the project doesn't even work. And that doesn't seem like a good partnership. It doesn't seem like somebody, and I don't know. The whole thing, when this item came forward, and I saw that, it was never been done before to anything similar. I mean, you can make the case. I mean, you have the auto auction area, the impact of that, of all those vehicles moving in and out of there, that there might be some need for something to mitigate for the public. But a data center?
Commissioner,
I'm going to finish. It doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't rise to any connection. So, which is one of the reasons why I asked that this come back. I think we're on very legal, shaky grounds. And I don't disagree that we should have that policy, but I also think we need to really look at it and sit down and review it. And maybe it should be a requirement so that people know coming in what's going to be required of them so that they can make sense of whether they want to bring something forward or not. But to slap it on somebody at the 12th hour, that's all I have to say about this.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say for staff direction, I'm okay with the policy as it is. I think the word may gives us discretion. I'm good with that. That makes it a case-by-case basis. So that means every one of these that comes through. And honestly, I'm okay with it expanding because the project should be taken as a whole. And the reason I'm okay with that is because of rational nexus and essential nexus. We have listed on page 9, essential nexus, which means we have to actually know what the project is as a whole in order to determine the nexus. So we can't make that determination unless we look at the project as a whole. And we know that we have projects that come before us that have a land use change, and then they come before us again and maybe add the parcel next door, And it's a slight change, but it could be a significant enough change that would bring this to us. And that's the determination. I wouldn't want to handicap future boards on those decisions to be made. But essential nexus, rational nexus, and it has to be proportionate to the nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development. Those to me are the most important things that are in here. And that's a tough one to prove. And you will have to prove, because this is a taking of a few acres of land. Now, PUDs bring residents. We know there's fire rescue, there's parks, there's library, there's a number of things that residents will want when it comes to these large-scale uses. MUPDs may bring residents, may not. These are the determinations that you will have to make on a case-by-case basis. But as far as the policy that's here, I'm okay with what's here, just because you do have the burden of proving this. And I think you've heard from this board, you have a very uphill battle at this point. I don't see how you get there. I'm not going to say you don't, but that is the burden. And if we can just tighten, I don't think we even need to tighten it up. I like how it is. But I would just say, I don't think that we should handicap ourselves to not look at a project as a whole, because sometimes these things change significantly from adding the parcel next door or whatever happens. So I think that should be part of the determination, because how else do you prove nexus unless you look at what's fully going there? And as I understand it, we don't know that until we're talking site plans and actual development, because land use changes happen and it can sit there for 20 years until someone else decides to buy it and actually develop it. So I don't know how we, reconcile those two for the future owner of the property, but I think that they should know this may happen to them depending on their use of the property, of what they're going to build. Then we may do this if the nexus is determined. So for policy, I'm okay with keeping it as it is, and you do have an uphill battle.
Agreed.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Baxter.
Thank you, Mayor. I could not agree more. So I like the policy the way it is. I like May. I like the discretion of the board, especially for individual sites. I understand the value and the necessity for civic sites and future planning. But again, to reiterate, where this is going to having a information storage center, to have it in the middle of a rock mine is not an appropriate place for a civic site. And I would like future boards to be able to make that determination as well, that at an individual site, and see what is appropriate and what is not. I think that's really essential. To address the breaking down in phases that Commissioner Flores had said, is that possible that if we did, and I'm not suggesting we do this because again, I like the policy, I just want to know what it would do to the overall policy. If we limited it to what's before us, how would the people be able to break it down into, let's say, 74 acres and then come back for another 74 if we delimit it to just what's in front of us?
It is a possibility, Vice Mayor, and we do see it at present from time to time. PUDs will come in, they'll develop a phase one, they'll suddenly take title to adjacent property, bring it in, add it to the PUD. We're only supposed to be looking at the affected area, what they're bringing in. It is a way to circumvent the intent of the policy. We've had some challenges with that before, to be honest with you.
So the 100+ acres that's already currently been there and it's been approved, how long ago was that approved?
I believe it was 2016.
So 8, almost 9 years ago. And the other phased projects, how often do they usually take that long, or are they usually quicker?
It really depends upon the project. It depends upon a whole host of factors that are really beyond our control.
Gotcha. Again, I agree. I think that the word may gives us the most discretion, and this site specifically is why we need that discretion. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Flores.
So I have a couple of comments. One, going back to Commissioner Weiss's comment, if we are changing things at the last moment, I'm not a fan of that. So my historical knowledge of this is about 25 days old. So I think that's a different issue that what I'm trying to look at. I'm more focused right now on the policy and how this is going to impact future projects moving forward, not so much this specific one. So to me, that's a concern that they're able to divide, subdivide, go into phases, get away with not having to provide that 2%. My question, piggyback into Commissioner Baxter's comments, is if they start doing this, and I want it to be looked at as a whole project, but what if they sell? Like phase one is one company, phase two is a different company. Now we lost out on that 2%. If it's under that 75 acres?
A development order runs with the land. Sales don't change the conditions, the site plan approvals, anything of that nature. Typically, when we find those complicating circumstances, we'll raise it through the staff review. We'll negotiate with the applicant. We'll see if we can't come to some kind of consensus to resolve it. If it can't be resolved and it's truly a technical issue, I would feel obligated to bring it to the board's attention for awareness and a policy decision. Through all this discussion, I'll tell you, if former Commissioner, now Senator Bernard, left any impression on me, it's that staff does not make policy. This board makes policy. And when we encounter those policy decisions, we're supposed to bring it to this board for those tough decisions to be made.
Because the way I'm seeing it is, at the end of the day, we're going to have to provide these services to these folks at some point. And I understand that the burden is for you to prove that there is something that's required, but we don't know what we're going to need in 10 years. And as more people move out there, we lost an opportunity to acquire a piece of land that might be crucial in the growth of this county. Going back to that 2%. So if it's under 75, we don't claim that let's say that 1 acre.
Staff does not. The language says, you can take a civic site of any acreage. We, as staff, our practice, based upon what we know we need as a footprint for development and the other issues I went through, why we don't like to just take land, we typically let those be. If we have a pressing need, if we have an identified deficit or deficiency for a service provider, and we think it would fit on something less, we'll bring it to the board.
So can't we take that one and then cash it out, or is that not?
In which instance?
Hypothetical instance, policy. That's what I'm more focused, once again, on policy is there is a 65-acre project coming before. Nothing less than 1.5 acres is useful to us. Do we still claim that 1 point whatever acre can we cash it out?
Hasn't been practice or policy to date, and I see Patrick wants to speak. I might also look to my colleagues from the county attorney's office with the nexus requirement. That's not something we've been doing.
And that nexus, that burden of proof, is it specific to the site or the community as a whole?
It's
project.
project, yeah, it's project specific. It has to offset the impacts of the project that's subject of the application.
And that's by statute, law, or policy?
Well, that's by law.
By law.
That's
Okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to add, thank you, Mayor, the uniqueness of every single situation. You don't know what the demands might be in any specific geographic location. FDO looks to the future with our user departments as much as possible, but you don't know. That's them looking in that 5-10-year window. Things can change. I just wanted to bring to your attention yet an item on Tuesday's regular agenda. That was a drainage easement for Atlantic Commons. That was a result of an internal swapping of properties where there were small civic sites scattered throughout the Ag Reserve, consolidated in a different one. That's a unique presentation in and of itself. Every single one is different. Every piece of geography is different. It's really difficult to fully forecast it. You can have a pretty good idea on demands, but things do change.
Thank you. Actually, I do. Wow, I haven't even asked a question. We have two cards. Why don't we give our folks a chance to talk?
Drew Martin and Alexandria Larson.
Thank you for waiting.
No problem. I thought when I saw this item, I thought it would go quickly, so I guess I misjudged. But I'm glad you have lots of questions. That's definitely fine with me. Drew Martin on behalf of the Los Angeles Sierra Club. I really don't think there's ever a case where you don't need civic property. And I really hate to see you sell it or, I mean, let them, whatever, give you cash. We saw that in the Ag Reserve. GL did that. They built homes. And then you came back and you need a fire station. And you need parks. Look, there are not enough parks out there in the Ag Reserve. Why is that? Because you gave away civic land that you could have had. And if 1,200 people are coming here every day, do you really think that you're not at some point going to need that land? So why? And, you know, developers make a lot of money, okay? GL's selling homes for up to $5 million. They can afford to give you some land. So I really hate to see the word may, and I hate to see you have discretion not to take the land, because in the end, it doesn't come out of your pockets as much as it comes out of our pockets. Because if you don't get the land, you think there's not going to be a need for ambulance service, fire service, libraries, et cetera, at some point in the future, and now you're going to have to go buy it, and it's going to be a lot more expensive than if you just got it right now. So, I mean, staff obviously doesn't want to tell you what to do. They can't tell you what to do, but they're trying to kind of let you know that if you give this up, what's going to happen now. You might say in a particular case, like the Park of Commerce, that it's not a site where you think you would want anything civic there, but who knows? Who knows 50 years from now what it'd be like? But if you don't have, then you're going to have to go buy it. So again, I would just really like you not to give away land that future commissions might need, or future citizens. And I'm particularly pointing at the Ag Reserve, where you have given away civic land, and they now have not have the adequate services because past commissions did that. Thank you.
I'm sorry I wasn't here on Tuesdays, Commissioners, but I'm going to give you some numbers. We have 1.5 million acres in this county. We're the biggest county east of the Mississippi. You know how many acres of parks you got? 8,190. That's a pathetic number. We're lacking in parks, obviously. GL has never put in workforce housing. They buy their way out of it. Builders do. They used to make 20%. Now they make about 80%. It's proprietary language. They don't have to tell us how much they make. They should tell you at least, maybe a secret squirrel club with the commissioners. Well, we make this much, commissioners. We do need civic. The Palmar up at the Central Park area, out of the 99, we took the 150 million we were supposed to serve parkland, reserve the farmland and environmental. We did a really good job up there in the Palmar. We bought 33,000 acres. You can check the numbers, ask them, they'll probably know. I wish we had saved 33,000 acres of farmland instead of 2,500. This is what we need to start weighing, commissioners, what we're going to do. I know one of the commissioners was saying we don't anything in a rock mining operation. Well, we weren't supposed to build out to the rock mining operation. It was eastward ho for a very long time in this county. That was our history. This is what is horrible, commissioners, what you have to weigh up there. And everybody has an idea. I certainly don't think employees should be dressed down at a county meeting, dress them down in the hallway. You know what I mean? I did that with my crew. I wouldn't dress them down. And they are not. You are in charge of policy. You really are. That's who you are. You are the policy. And every several years, we change boards and we change ideas. But when you think about parks, I want you to keep that number in mind. 1.5 million acres, 8,000. That's so, little. And that means firehouses, libraries. Go try to get the numbers on libraries sometimes, commissioners. They built 12 of them for $25 million. The one they built in the acreage, just the one, cost $12 million. That's how much our money has the cost. The cost. And the reason I'm down here a lot of times is the cost. What is the cost to the taxpayers? Because it's really easy to spend other people's money. It's really hard not to spend your own. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Baxter.
Mayor, I would just like to address some of the comments made today. A couple things. When we're talking about cost to taxpayers, one of the most expensive things we get into is litigation. And we can't just take a civic pod because we think we are going to need it for some future use. There has to be an essential nexus, an essential reason that that development is causing to require that civic pod. Also, within, just down the road, not far, we already have 28 acres for a civic sites. And then just down from that, we have another almost 9 acres, which is going to be a fire station and a library. So we already have dedicated civic sites, acres and acres and acres of it, very close to this site. So when you say we're always going to need civic, I don't disagree, but I also don't want to cost taxpayer dollars in a lawsuit for a taking of property that we have not proven an essential nexus for. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Wow. I don't think I need to say anything. I think everybody has covered it. The only thing I would say is we need to make sure that there's a delineation where FDNO stops and where P&Z begins. It sounds like there's a little angst going on there, so we need to make sure that we know where one starts and one ends. But having said that, I think consensus of the board is stay the course for now. You will be coming back to us in January. Tread lightly is all I can say for January. There does need to be a rational nexus for why we are asking for land. Going back to the point, though, of how do you look at a project in pieces? That's really important because there are projects where they come in smaller than they need to so that they can ignore requirements, not ignore, but go around them. So that is something that we as a board will have to look at going forward. But the word may gives us the discretion to do that. And like law, there's a lot of ambiguity in the law. And this is one of those times. So rational nexus is what makes it required. And where, as Vice Mayor Baxter said, we don't want to be in a lawsuit. So we have to be able to do what we can prove in court to be accurate and correct. So I don't see any other lights on. And normally at this time, I would ask our directors and whatnot to speak. So County Attorney, anything else you'd like to add?
No comments.
Okay. Planning Director.
On behalf of the Planning Director, happy holidays. We'll see you next year.
Thank you. Zoning Director.
No comments other than the same thing. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Executive Director.
Same thing. Happy holidays. Thanks, staff.
Deputy County Administrator.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Would any of the...
I think we wanted...
Oh.
Patrick, I'm sorry. Didn't you want to announce? No? Something's RFP's been issued?
Oh, the RFP is out.
And I think Twee was able to send an email to board members. The RFP for the Master Transportation Plan went live this morning.
It's printed and in my purse right now. Thank you very much. Any commissioners have something they'd like to say?
Thank you. I did want to follow up with the board that you are, with the Planning and Zoning, that you'll be coming back to discuss the water issues that were brought up with the data center before we vote on this at the end of January? Okay. And also happy, merry, all the holidays.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did want to announce, no, we won't be seeing each other until after Christmas, but the holidays, the last time I announced the passing of Marion Dozier, I also want to announce the passing of Riviera Beach's first Black Fire Chief, Richard Wester, passed away, I believe, 2 nights ago, and I did want to keep his family in prayer and make sure that we recognize that for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. See you then.
So it's that whole Merry Christmas Hanukkah thing. There you go. Yes, all be well, be safe, have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in, oh my gosh, the new year of 2025. Have a great day.